navigating love and loss through the holidays. This time of year can be challenging, to say the least. And whether your loss happened recently or years ago, we can still feel that ache in our hearts of who's missing. And I know Hollywood, sometimes I always go to the movies. When we watch the movies, or those always show us how no matter what happens, everybody is still happy during the holidays. And that isn't always the case. In reality, many of us are sad, are lonely, are hurting, either because of our circumstances or because we are missing someone. And so today I'm going to have conversations with people who have experienced loss in different forms. And we're going to have these conversations heart to heart in regards to what have they, and I don't want to use the word learned because I don't think grief ever teaches us anything, but what path have they taken to make their holidays a little bit less painful? And before we start, I always like to make sure that we are grounded in taking a few deep breaths, just so that way we are coming from a place of peace, a place of being grounded. And I also want, if you are missing someone, to say their name, either in the chat or silently, because we want to remember them. And I also want to start to say that the space that we are at is a gentle space, a space to allow for your feelings, for your thoughts without judgment. Because in grief, we are not broken and we do not need to be fixed. And here we do not offer advice. So if anyone's looking for advice, this isn't the place. Because what we want to do is we want to acknowledge who you are, what your experience is, and to validate who you are. So we're just going to have a moment of silence and a deep breath. Now, my line is carrying love and loss in the same breath, because we only have one breath. And I do want to now introduce my upcoming guest, Adriana Himmager. Sorry, Adriana, I hope I said your name properly. Who is also a grief coach like myself. Oh, I should have introduced myself. I'm Maria Belanic, your host. I'm a certified grief educator and bereaved mom. But I'm going to have a conversation with, I hope, my new friend, because we've met recently and just her story has touched me. And how she expresses herself definitely has resonated deeply with me. So Adriana supports women who have experienced the death of a loved one by suicide and are ready to rebuild their lives and discover who they are outside of their loss. Adriana, welcome.
Thank you, Maria, so much. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here to speak with you and to connect with others as well. And I love what you've done. I love what you're offering, how this is a gentle conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. And I know that your story is, well, all stories are deeply personal. And when we grasp death by suicide, that still has, in some ways, a taboo around it, which I'm saddened to hear. And it shouldn't. But I know that your journey, you've come now to a place of peace And what I'm kind of wondering is when the holidays come, like I know for me sometimes, my son passed away, it's been 15 years. The holidays still come up, and my body still sometimes gets that anxious feeling. All right. And so for yourself, what do you find for the holidays? Does it dredge up something that you didn't think was still possible?
In my first couple of years, I really, really struggled. I wasn't looking forward to the holidays. I just remember saying to my husband, I wish there was a button at the beginning of December that I could fast forward to the beginning of January. And over time, I found that my grief has softened. And in its place, initially, it just felt like a void, which I avoided because I didn't know what was there. Now, coming to year 3 and year 4, this is now going to be year 5. I found I wanted to create rituals. So I tried on ones like lighting a candle, writing a letter, spreading some of his ashes, um, holding an extra plate for him at the table. But those things didn't feel like me. They didn't really resonate. And so last year, I actually didn't do anything. I was just present with what was coming up with what was coming up during the holidays, but I found that they weren't as difficult. That urge to want to press that rewind button, it wasn't there. In fact, the first 2 weeks, I felt a little bit sad, but I thought, okay, it's going to be really important for me to create new traditions for me to honor my brother. So I actually started on his anniversary in August. And one of the things that I did that I'm actually going to do this year that feels really important was I went to where he died and I bought 4 extra large pizzas and I went around and to people that were homeless and living in poverty, I spent time talking with them and I gave them pizza. And I thought, this is it. This is one of the rituals because it was a way of me giving back. It was a way of me honoring my brother. And because he also struggled with some of those things. And I thought, no, this is what I wanted to do. And it felt really right. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's one of the things I'm going to be doing this year. But this year, I mean, there's moments of sadness, sure, Maria, because I miss my brother, but there's also moments of joy and connection. And instead of feeling really sad, it's like, I think, what are the things that I can do to honor my brother?
And I love that, how you said that. And I got goosebumps
Thank you.
when you had said that you went and bought the pizza and gave it out. Because what a way to honor his life. And this is the aspect I think that I want us to all grasp is whether we agree with someone of how they live their lives.
Mhm.
It is not us, it's not on us to judge them. And that is a beautiful way. And I love that because I've heard of other traditions, as you said, of the empty plate, you know, the candles, and you're doing what is right for you
Mhm.
and what feels right for both of you. I don't know if you want to share your brother's name.
Sure, I would love to. It's Steve.
Steve.
I also wanted to add something. Early on, Maria, I had a lot of dread and I wanted to not be present. I really resisted going into the holidays. And in my mind, I created something that I thought it was going to be a lot painful than what they were. And that created a huge resistance and not really being present and meeting the energy that was there. Whether there were moments of sadness, but early on, I didn't leave room for anything else because it was I was afraid of going into it. I was resisting it, wanting to bypass it, wanting to do anything other than be present. And there were other moments of joy, but I didn't really see them.
Mm.
And now I do see them. Sure, I miss my brother. Sure, I feel sad. And there are all these other things that haven't taken his place. They just add, they just add to it.
And I love how you say that because a lot of time, and I apologize, I have a bit of a cold, so my throat, um, is that we want to run away
Mhm.
from our feelings. We want to hide from them, almost like if we can separate them, then they won't affect us. And we realize that that doesn't really happen. I mean, we'd love to sort of say, can we compartmentalize them, like taking them out, put them in the drawer, put them in the closet, and they never come out. Um, and the more we run away from them, the more they stay with us. And you're right, in the sense of the first time that you ever felt joy, I felt guilty. Like, oh, it's like, oh my, like I'm not supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be sad. And that conflicts. Like, and I know that that's what you've mentioned too. Like there's now moments of joy that you see
Mhm.
and you feel. How does that now make you feel when you have these joys? Like, do you still feel the twinge of guilt, or do you just accept the joy that is coming and go, I can do both?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Maria. It's actually one of the things that I wanted to bring up. In my third year, I started feeling glimpses of joy, and I thought, I felt incredible guilt, like I'm betraying my brother. Like, how can I be happy? How? And I really struggled with that because it was wanting to be happy, feeling little bits of it. And I'm like, no, this feels like a betrayal. I I really struggled with the guilt, and I realized I needed to give myself permission that I'm allowed to feel joy. And I'm also allowed to miss my brother. And I'm also allowed to be sad. There doesn't have to be one or the other. One is not a betrayal of the other. There's room in my heart, in my life for both. There's space to hold both. Now, there's no guilt, Maria.
Mm,
If anything, letting go of the guilt has allowed for a deeper connection to my brother. It's allowed for it's allowed for more love and more joy and to be present in the moments because I found when I was closing my heart to what was hurting, it also closed my heart to joy and what would allow to bring me peace and happiness. And I thought, well, let's just see what happens if I gave myself permission to feel joy. What would happen? Am I allowed? Is this okay? Yes, Adriana. And actually, this is what Steve would want for you.
mm. I love that because it does it that question, and I think many of us feel that, where it's that guilt if we laugh. Um, And we see it sometimes with the people around us.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've had that with the people around you. All of a sudden, if you're too sad, they don't want to be around you because they sort of walk on eggshells. And if you laugh, all of a sudden it's like, oh, great, you're over it. And this is, it took me a long time. And this is one of the reasons why I say it's carrying love and loss in the same breath. Because we can have these dual emotions, having feeling loss for the person that we're missing and joy for what we're experiencing. So we can experience joy and sadness at the same time. So what did you find when you're around people, especially like, like the holidays? You go outside. I mean, I know right now I haven't heard Christmas music yet. But there are Christmas markets, there's, all the decorations, all the gifts, and all this. And it's a balance sometimes if we have other family members or friends that want to go all out. and maybe we don't. How have you handled that? Or does it even come up?
To be honest with you, Maria, it doesn't really come up. And I think because I addressed this early on, and one of the things that helped me let go of the guilt was shifting that. There were days where I'm not going to say withdrew, but I felt more introspected. Felt more introspective, and I just let everything be okay with it. And I've got very supportive and loving friends and family, which has been such a blessing.
Mm.
So it didn't come up for me as much.
And
But
that's
what I did do and what I am doing and what I'll continue to do is that there may be days where I just feel like I need to retreat completely, kind of disengage from the Christmas spirit. And that's okay. Because the days where I do that, I'm nurturing and honoring what may need a little more self-care so that so that I'm able to give more of myself to um, that I'm able to give more of myself and be more outgoing or more engaged. Because even though these are the holidays, grief operates on a continuum, at least it does for me. It doesn't say, okay, so we're going to take a break from December 1st to blah, blah, blah. No,
oh, that
it's
would
a
be lovely if it could, right?
it's a continuation even through the holidays. So I just sort of ride with it like that. Every moment, every experience is okay.
I was going to say, and I love how you said you, I mean, not exact the same words, but lean into it in the sense of you allow your feelings to be validated. And that takes a lot of practice because it doesn't come naturally. Because I think many of us, it is, we use the thing about running away. We want to run away from anything that hurts us, anything that causes pain. And this is one of those paradox or oxymorons where it's actually the opposite that gives us freedom. When we lean into the pain, that actually sets us free from it. So, what kind of things have you found that you did that helped you lean into the pain?
The two biggest things, Maria, I stopped comparing myself to other types of grief, to other types of loss, to where someone else was. I let go of the expectations that I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? I should be further along. Why am I still struggling? Maybe why am I feeling sad? My grief was my grief. It wasn't better or different or worse than anybody else's, as it is for nobody else. But the moment I let go of the expectations for how things should be or how they are supposed to look, or I should be over here by now, and I just accepted where I was, and I stopped comparing myself, comparing grief, those were the two biggest things that shifted. And also realized that early on, I had this idea, hope, expectation that I was going to be here at the end of year one. I was nowhere near close to that at the end of year one. And then I did the same thing at year two. At the end of year two, I thought, I think I need to let go of this and just let it be. And when my energy was really low, especially during anniversaries and holidays, I stopped drinking a ton of coffee to boost my energy. I stopped pushing and I thought, Adriana, you need to slow down. You need to take a step back. Your energy is low for a reason. What are the nurturing, loving, supportive things that I can do? Have a bath, give myself a facial, watch a movie, meditate, go for a walk in nature during the holidays. Maybe it meant spending a little more time on my own, which I still do. Those were the things that were really, really, really helpful. I stopped drinking instead of, I can't face this. This is too painful. I need to numb it. because what I was numbing just said, okay, we're going to wait for you until you can be present with us.
Mm.
And making space for tears without an explanation. My tears don't need an explanation. They don't need words. They need presence. They need space. They need my attention. And I found that softening and leaning into things, it allowed me to come out, and I felt more open and free and expansive. And actually, by not resisting, that's what allowed me to feel more joy. So this year, I'm absolutely looking forward to the holidays. I know there may be still little moments of sadness, but I feel my brother with me a lot more than I did in previous years.
Mm.
So it's, for me, it was creating more time, more space, not resisting what's coming up, and really embracing and nurturing, grounding, supportive, loving, gentle exercises, because that's what my grief needs in that moment. Other moments, it needs connection with other people. It doesn't need Adriana, taking time away. It needs connection with family. It needs maybe enjoying an eggnog latte at Starbucks, listening to Christmas music, which I actually really love. It needs connecting with other people. It needs joy and laughter and all of the other things, not just my tears.
And I love that expression. It just stayed with me. My tears don't need an explanation.
Yeah.
That is, and you're right. All of us find our path to what we do to honor our person and also to have joy within our own lives. Because I think a lot of times, I mean, and I know I did this in my early years. There's that guilt that all of a sudden, if I'm not sad, I'm disrespecting.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm happy, I'm disrespecting. Because how can I be happy? We have that guilt in us, which it's our mind, I think, wanting to control something that we cannot control. And I love how your expressions of joy have happened. And and it's so true. I always go, nowadays, it's actually the simple things that bring joy. Beforehand, like before loss, we were taught, not taught, but I think there's that influence that all of a sudden you could only be happy if you had big things happen in your life. It's only the big things that make you happy. When in actual fact, it's the small things. It's the simple pleasures that bring joy. And I go, joy is actually more lasting than happiness, because happiness is that elusive. I mean, I don't know how many books there are about, running after happiness, but no one, I think, has ever written a book. So anybody out there, if you have a book in you, maybe it should be The Simple Joys of Pleasure.
One of the things that I've started doing, Maria, I get up, I like to get up early, like really early, and put on, we have a beautiful tree with, like we have a beautiful fake tree with lights, put on the fireplace. Sometimes, well, right now I put on Christmas music, but it's the simple moments. And I actually feel my brother there with me, just enjoying a coffee by the fireplace, listening to music, and just being in that space. No cell phone, no TV, no nothing. Just
Mm.
being in that moment. Sometimes I
Now,
talk to my brother out loud, sometimes it's silent. It's things like that. It's going for walks, it's going for drives. And for me, it's actually slowing down and not filling every moment of every day with something. It's it's not filling my life with distractions to avoid. It's actually slowing everything right down. Because for me, joy, they're in those moments not in the ones where I'm keeping busy, not the ones where I'm distracting. It's in the moments where everything is slowed right down. My time, my voice, my pace, my breath. And they're unexpected moments of joy,
Mm.
not ones that I plan. Although there's joy in those too,
Mhm.
but there's joy in all the unexpected ones. Maybe it's waking up and just feeling really peaceful. That brings me joy.
Or it's actually learning to be in the present,
Mhm.
in, in the moment. Because a lot of times, many of us, with or without loss, have this aspect that it's the busyness. It's we have to keep constantly on the go. And people sometimes aren't fully present. And that's one of the things that I found from loss is that after each moment is precious. And even if I'm doing something, it's you're fully present in that. But what I did want to ask you, because because sometimes, no matter how much time loss has happened, is there a moment or something that still catches you off guard, that activates you? Because I think a lot of times, and the reason I want to ask this is because the majority of people, if they haven't experienced loss, or even if they have, we have this expectation that there's a time limit to how long we can grieve, or that we're supposed to be better. I always go, yeah, we're better at pretending and masking.
Mhm.
uh, However, there are still those unexpected moments that all of a sudden you turn around and just kind of gut wrenches you.
Absolutely. I mean, aside from my brother's birthday, which was on the 14th, and aside from his anniversary, there are still moments where I could be going out for dinner and there's a song that reminds me of my brother, or going out someplace, or it could be a smell, or it could be seeing like a double rainbow in the sky. In those moments, Maria, it feels like my breath is taken away. And I literally have to stop because sometimes it's a really intense wave of sadness. And I used to resist that. And I used to, clench my jaw, hold my breath so that I wouldn't go into it. I wouldn't feel it. And now, depending where I am, actually always where I am, I will stop what I'm doing. Even if it's just for a moment or two, I will stop what I'm doing. If I'm able to, I will go into a space where I can be present with that. And usually it's crying, but it doesn't last for hours. If I'm present with the feeling, it won't last very long. But if there are tears that need to come up, then I honor that because my grief it doesn't stop just because, okay, it's been, it's been almost 5.5 years now. This is where you should be. No, no expectations. And I know that there's going to be those moments that are going to require, okay, let's take a step back. What do I need to do in this moment to honor these feelings or what's come up or this memory?
Mm.
What do I need to do to honor this moment? Because when I do that, I honor myself. And when I honor myself, to me, I also honor my brother. And there are sometimes in those moments, I just say, thank you, Steve. I know that was you. I know that was you.
And it is. And I think sometimes there's this aspect that either grief intensifies over the holidays or it disappears over the holidays. And it really does neither. I mean, sometimes it intensifies because I think, or I believe, because of the celebrations that are happening around, which is in some ways true, especially when you're having family gatherings. We know who's missing. And that aspect, whether it's at the holiday season or in another one, like sometimes I always go, even when you're having family reunions at different times of the year, holidays are holidays or these traditions that people are coming up. I love the new tradition that you have done and going to continue on. That really touches, I think, my heart. And again, I was going to say, I wish more people would do that. But again, not everyone can because it takes really hard to have someone give food and listen to someone living on the street, their story. And one of the things is that people on the street, we don't know what their circumstances are. And you and I both have talked about this going, none of us know what our breaking point is.
Mhm.
And where we're going to find ourselves in life. But Adriana, what I'd love for you to have is basically share on how you help because of your experience. Because death by suicide is different than, I mean, there's different nuances in loss because of that.
So one of the ways that I help Maria, the specific challenges are dealing with the unanswered questions. So many people get stuck for years and sometimes decades with the unanswered questions. They feel like they can't move forward. They're looking for closure, but closure doesn't exist with suicide. It's supporting them with the various aspects of guilt and what's underneath the guilt, feeling responsible, blaming themselves, holding themselves accountable, feeling guilty. How can I possibly move forward? How can I rebuild my life? And do I even want to? I'm not sure. It feels like I'm leaving my loved one behind. So it's really about reframing all of that, giving permission and understanding that you aren't leaving your loved one behind. When you rebuild your life and who you are, you move forward with them. It's just in a different way. It's not leaving your loved one behind.
And I thank you so much for that because we know that loss is universal. And at times it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There are different nuances because of the relationship and because of the circumstances. And I thank you so much for being here and for being my guest and coming out and having this conversation because it is a hard conversation. Um, thank you.
Maria, I also want to thank you so much, not only for inviting me, but also for hosting this for people, for extending this gentle invitation. I think it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing, and thank you so much.
Well, we're both grief educators, and definitely, I mean, we do. We want to go out and educate because Adriana and I are the faces of grief.
Mhm.
We've each experienced grief, and we are the faces of grief. We will all, well, I always I'm a forever griever. Um, but that's not going to change how I go about in life. It's actually just shifted something, but who I am or who I've become is me, the I am.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much. And I know, I think definitely we'll have your contact info. We'll put out your website so that way people can contact you, especially other women who have experienced a family member, a loved one, death by suicide. Adriana is the person to work with.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you. Oh, it is. I mean, my next guest is here. So we're going to continue on with our conversations. So Renee Dupuy, I actually met her because I said yes to being on her summit. And from that, it's a different aspect of the grief journey. So Renee is a heart and soul. She is the heart and soul behind Trauma Wise. And her passion for trauma informed has come from personal experience that ignited a desire to make a difference in the lives of individuals and communities. Renee, I am so thankful that you said yes to, to being on here and to share about your experience and also about trauma, because in some ways people don't see that in trauma there is loss and grief, right? Like not all trauma is going to have, or not all loss is going to have trauma, but all trauma is going to have grief.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me for this conversation and for asking. And that was such a wonderful invitation. And I've enjoyed the conversations that you and I have had um, inside the summit and outside the summit as well, and how much we've been able to reflect to each other the breadth and depth of loss, and how I would say without judgment, just as an assessment, how illiterate we are culturally with grief and loss. That it's not something that we have learned um, to understand, and it's not that anybody's wrong or bad. It is as a result of lots of different parts of our systems and society. And when we when we rush through, when we are forced to rush through because of the environments we're in, maybe the families, maybe the culture, to rush through those bereavement times, those grief times, it is traumatic because we have these unfinished processes. The reality of things that are hard, there's not space that's left for it.
Mm.
And that lack of opportunity for expression is caught. I mean, it causes neural pathways to form that are not helpful for us, and it causes us to learn um, to mask, or to contain, or to swallow. And one of the therapists that I really enjoy her podcast um, is Therapy in a Nutshell, and she had a phrase she brought up earlier this year where she said, I think I've come to realize that the opposite of depression is expression.
That's an interesting line.
Right? And that when we aren't able to express ourselves, our realities, our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, our passion, who we are, that it results in depression. That there's a part of us that there is a death of the belief that we get to be who we are supposed to be, that we
Mm.
get to show up, and the body's normal natural response to that is depression. So there's a so even in that, when we it can look like a little T trauma that turns into a big T trauma when it happens over and over and over again, when there's not space for us to show up as ourselves.
And if we're going, like, say, for the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
because the holidays intensify emotions,
Absolutely.
especially when whether it's true or not. I always go, sometimes, we watch the movies, um, social media, everyone else around us is looking like they're having so much fun. Their lives are so much better. Does that intensify, sort of like, especially when we've experienced trauma, even more so? Like, because of course, as you said, I love that line about depression and expression, of tying it together. Someone who's experienced loss, trauma, has a hard time expressing that, or feels that they cannot, especially when they're surrounded by people who want to party and celebrate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a couple of levels to that, I think. And one of them is um I had the great privilege of getting to be trained by Dr. Robert Anda to become an ACE master trainer, ACE interface master trainer, which all that means is I can teach people to how to teach other people about trauma, about ACE, adverse childhood experiences and trauma. But the 2 days were really, really cool. And in that time, he had given this very philosophical talk that started out looking at art and talking about the purpose of humanity, and really a beautiful conversation I was not expecting to hear from a CDC scientist. Um, and in that, he talked about the narratives that are written on us by trauma. And if I to distill all the things that he listed, it's telling us that it's all our fault and it's never going to end.
Mm.
Those are the lies. And that the I would add the third is you're all alone.
And that you're so true, because that replays in a griever's mind, or in someone who, I'm going to say griever, but again, in grief, there is trauma. Um, that it is. There's that feeling that, oh, if only I had done, those loops, the what ifs, the should haves, all of that, the guilt feeling that we could have altered the outcome.
Right.
Um, and of course, with the all alone, like no one's going to understand what I'm feeling. No one has experienced this beforehand. And there's this aspect that keeps looping around. Uh, and the only, and I'm trying to say, how do we stop it? Because I know language is so important, right? I mean, this is one of the things that I always struggle with sometimes is, as a griever, I've now know how important language is because of how it lands on someone else.
Mhm. Mhm.
And words are so important of how we say things.
Yeah. I think that, to go to your back to your question of how do we stop it, and I know that, like, I could feel the wrestle with that because it that
Yeah, because
because
you
you're
don't really stop
because
pain.
you're not
How do
right.
you acknowledge it, sort of aspect, right?
And so part of that is that Dr. Anda went on in his talk to say it's the role of the healers, it's the role of the helpers, it's the role of the people around the person who's experienced the trauma, and we can say loss even in this, to hold hope and give them a new narrative. And I think this is the key. It's to give them a new experience and a repeated experience over and over, because that forms the new neural pathway that tells the truth against those lies. Because those things, there is a reason they're called lies. They're not the reality. They're exactly what my brain and body is telling me by patterns and experience and fear that is taking over, because I feel that isolation. I feel that I'm not seen, heard, and valued, understood, held, that I'm alone. And if I'm a person on the outside of someone who's experiencing that, and I have capacity in that moment, that's my caveat, and I
Mhm.
have capacity, it is part of my human responsibility to hold, to be there, to witness, and not to fix, but to witness and leave space for that expression and to affirm the reality of the pain and and address this piece where the 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 grief and loss and trauma comes from a betrayal.
Mm.
Things that happened when we've experienced something. Trauma is the effect of a adversity, of a hard thing that happens in our life, and it is the result in our brain and our body is the traumatic effect of that circumstance or event, and it's how our brain and body experience it. And my brain and body are going to experience things differently than someone else's brain and body. And so it's not helpful for someone to say, well, that's not really scary, or that's not really that bad, or if you just watched a few more Hallmark movies, or if you lit some more candles, or you did more self-care, or you talked to a counselor, all of that is dismissing my reality.
And I love
And
how you say that because it is so true. There are so many people. I always go, I've had to learn they have well intentions, or they're right. They don't mean to harm, but they are out there wanting to fix because they figure someone else is broken, or they want to ignore it. And I'm going to say, especially in the case of trauma, or even in loss, it's like if we don't say it, if we don't talk about it, if we ignore it, then in their mind, it didn't happen. And that to me sort of goes, it doesn't erase what happened. I know I always go, and I know we've discussed this too or talked about it. My line is healing isn't forgetting, right? Because a lot of times I used to dislike that word. Actually, I used to hate it with a passion. Because in some ways, healing meant I was going to forget. Because that is in some ways, and I don't know if it's taught or if it's implied.
Mhm.
And that becomes sort of that storyline that we fight against. Rather than saying, I can heal in my own way, I'm not going to forget the experience. And the experience, it is the traumatic experience. I mean, death is a traumatic experience. I know I called it love and loss because loss is a huge umbrella. And loss is even your own self identity.
Mhm.
Because in trauma and in grief, we question who we are.
Absolutely. And the after effects of an event that was a betrayal, and right, so that whether that is that a person who I trusted, who was supposed to care for me, harmed me, or that I was trusting that the common person on the street would be thoughtful and not harm me, or I would trust an institution, or I would trust my dreams, or there's all this part where there's a broken trust, there's a betrayal, where we had something we were holding on to. And it's okay for us, it's okay for us to dream. It's okay for us to want good things, and it's okay for us to expect to be treated well by other people. And it's okay for us to expect that our caregivers will care for us. Those are all reasonable expectations in our human experience. And when that doesn't happen, it's not a matter of, well, we need to change our mindset and not expect so much of people or not be attached. That's dissociation. That is the isolation we're gaslighting ourselves to make other people comfortable with the reality that there are these betrayals that have happened. And
Mm.
the healing comes when we're able to tell the full truth about what happened. And then the second part is to let go with compassion. And what we're letting go of is the narrative that formed, that lie that formed, that says it's our fault, it's never going to end, we're all alone. That's what we're letting go of. Not that the thing happened, not the effects of it, because when we even physiologically, when we are hurt, when we have an injury and we heal, we cannot go back to what was. We can't physiologically go back to what was. We have new structures, new cells, scar tissue, and we have often, if we have an injury that requires us to do PT or learn exercises or learn a new way, we will develop different strengths based on this adaptation. And I think that that's the part that when people are dismissive, or when we have not learned, we have not had um, the opportunity to really develop those muscles, that we feel like I don't have the tools to do this. I don't have the wherewithal. I can't. And that causes us to have a fight, flight, or freeze response. It causes us to default to whatever our strategy is for getting our needs met. And that's the part where, if we are giving people space, if we are saying, hey, can we tell the truth about things that have happened, compassionately grieve it, and name the injustice, to go back to talk about the betrayal, and someone dying that you are in relationship with, it feels like a betrayal. And I think that that's because you wanted them to be there.
Yeah.
You imagined
There's,
a life where they were there.
and I love how you say that, because a lot of times that is an unasked, or not unasked, but untold, where people can be angry at the person who passed away, because it's like, and even though it's not their fault, our brain kind of doesn't have that reality. Like, it's the abandonment, it's you left me. And as you said, the betrayal. And I love how you pointed out, which is so true. In grief, we say we live life from the scar, not the wound. Because, and that's really what loss is in some ways. It's a wound that has been opened up, and it becomes a scar. I always go, when people go, get back to normal. I was using this a while back. I go, for most people, when they say get back to normal, what they're meaning is get back to a place where I'm not uncomfortable with you,
Right.
where I don't have to deal with what you're dealing with right now. To the person who has experienced loss and the trauma, to them, getting back to normal means going back to a time when this didn't happen. And you can't have that. As you said, you cannot change. I mean, we'd all want that magic wand to go back in time and go, I like this time better. But that's not possible. And so those then two realities they're perceived realities, don't match up. And in that sense, we're kind of like at a junction of, where does the one person, especially the non-griever, the person who wants to be supportive, what can they do? And I know I want to kind of bring it back to the holidays. I mean, what you're saying applies all year round. The holidays aren't any different than another day. It's just, I think, because the holidays intensifies it.
Absolutely. And to be clear, when I say the betrayal, when someone dies, I yes, there is a part of the process where it is natural and normal for us to be angry at everyone involved in the in the system. Um, and it's like it's a betrayal against life. Like, life has betrayed me because I don't get to continue on with this person. So it's more of that than maybe directed at the person, because there's an injustice. It shouldn't have been that way.
Mm.
And I think that that's the naming of it. And so the challenge that comes during the holidays is, um, when we've experienced a loss, the that grievance, that injustice of that person should be here is highlighted during the times when we are gathering, when we're feeling tender moments, when we're experiencing wonder. It's in the Christian liturgical calendar, it's ordinary time, and then there's holiday time, right? It's a holy day. It's time. It's separate because there's this atmosphere of wonder and closeness and memories and joy. Um, and so for the people who are not maybe experiencing um, that grief process during that time, I think it's really important to create it. It just like, you're creating this space for this conversation in this summit in November. It is very common for me and people in this space. In November is a great time to do it because it's before we head to these gatherings, to say, hey, we need to leave room for remembrance. We need to leave room for telling stories. And I am in the States. I just want to apologize to everyone else in the world for the people in charge in my government right now. That is causing in the States, it's causing a lot of grief and loss as well, because there are families who cannot gather. That we can't, because the perception of reality is so drastically different between families, where people are like, people are hurting. People are hurting. And other people are like, I don't see what the problem is. And that makes it very hard to sit at a table with someone when you're hurting, or you're very aware of hurt that's happening in the people around you, and someone's like, what are you talking about? That's not it's the same thing as being dismissed with grief. And it is a grievance to say we're experiencing two different things right now.
And,
So
and I'm glad that you brought that up, because a lot of times, sometimes when we think of trauma and loss, we think about it happening just to us. And where it can happen in the community, it can happen in your country, in the world. There are us that can see the injustices that are happening, and that affects a person.
Absolutely. And I think um one of the so I actually had an event last week called Restoration Sessions, and it was to prepare for the holidays. And it was um practices around self-care and community care, heart, mind, body, and soul, and very short, here is one thing to look at. So we looked at grief and gratitude as one of the pieces, and saying we're not pushing toward a gratitude, we're identifying that we can hold both at the same time. It's okay to hold both at the same time. It doesn't, in fact, they don't diminish, they actually um, elevate and make them more poignant and sweet when you're able to hold both about at the same time. And another one that I did was called Restoration Circles, and it was having the conversations, the hard conversations before we gather, and setting up a way to say, listen, the table might not be the place for us to resolve this or to work through this. And so let's figure out how we can agree to either have a conversation beforehand, or have scripts that let us pull space to the side and say, I called it a parking lot, and say that's a parking lot discussion that we're going to have after, because the table is not the time to have this conversation. Right now, we're focusing on the connection. We're focusing on holding each other tenderly. We're focusing on creating the memory of this time now, because the time now is not guaranteed. And then we're going to say that we've carved out time to tell the truth of these things hurt, and what do we need to do to make it right? And I think that's part of the way that we can create space for these conversations of there's been a loss, there's been the intent and impact are two different things, and impact is much greater than intent. I can have not intended to hurt someone a bunch of different ways and still had an impact. And so saying, I'm so sorry for that impact. And what do I need to do to make that right?
Oh, I like
And
that.
right? I'm so sorry. And I don't, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It means that my impact was not matched up with my intent. And
Mhm.
as humans, if we tell the truth about that, then we are able to create these repair pathways. And these repair pathways, it's more of that becoming emotionally literate, becoming building those muscles of saying, um, there are things that are going to happen that are going to make us feel like it's never going to end. It's our fault and we're all alone. And we have built pathways to say, actually, we hold together that your voice matters, that your experience matters, that it's not your fault. It's just for now, it's not forever. You are not alone. And
And I love how you say that. Someone actually put a question in the chat about the scar and the wounds. I'm just going to, so Renee, I know this is your expertise. Um, she goes, when the won't heal because they have either estranged themselves from you or the family, is it just coming to terms with the act of betrayal, forgiving them, forcing conversation, or making your needs known to them?
yeah, that's very rich.
That's my
Yes to all of it in different ways. And so I will start with forgiveness. In that forgiveness is not forgetting, healing is not forgetting. And forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is not for them. And we can if we it's that same process of telling the full truth of what happened and letting go with compassion, is to say, this happened, I was harmed in this way. I don't I can explain to myself why the person might have done that, and it's actually very helpful, because we can say, well, this is their history, these are the patterns that whatever it happens to be, and that's just the reality. And that helps me to demystify some of it, to stop creating stories around it as to why it happened, or that I deserved it, or that there's something wrong with me, or any of those types of things that can creep up those lies. And say, yeah, this person struggles with addiction, this person has a traumatic history. There's all these different reasons that a person might do that, and so we have a reason for it. Doesn't excuse what happened, but it's a reason. And then we can continue on that pathway and say, I don't need to be tied to their reality and have that mean something about me in this situation. That's theirs to hold, not mine. They have caused the harm, I don't need to hold it. And letting and saying, this is a reality, it happened, I am not going to have that be my anchor, I'm not going to be tethered to that anymore. So I can tell the truth of it, but I don't need to take the meaning that might come from that is not true about me. And that's that forgiveness piece, right? It's the untethering from a false narrative that would come from that experience. So that can be done, and you never express it to the person. I in my classes about this, I definitely say that we do repair work with people who've expressed remorse. And if they haven't expressed remorse, it's not my conversation to have with them.
Mm.
Because if they want to do the repair, they will tell me.
And I love that. And Renee, I want to thank you for being here, but I do want to ask you what would you like to have the audience know, like in your something that you would like to have, like in parting words for them?
Absolutely. Um, I would like you to know that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Even if there's been an injury or a wounding, that you're there, you are an amazing you. And you have already lived through adversity and challenges, and you are doing the best that you can do. And that if you are a person who's in the midst of a grief cycle right now, and that space where it feels overwhelming and it feels like that you're alone, I promise you that that is not the full truth of the situation, even though that feels really big right now. It's not the full truth. You're not
Renee,
alone.
thank you so much. It has definitely been a pleasure having you on. I know you and I have had many conversations, and I love learning from you. I love your expertise, and thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm, very good question. I don't think that we can do anything about another person of how they are. I mean, I know Heidi, my next guest, is probably very good at answering this question. I really feel that as a guest, you basically do what helps you. Um, and if anyone approaches that feels that they're on eggshells, it could be because they're dealing with something on their own side. It really has nothing to do with you. And personally, I believe that you can only take care of yourself. You cannot really take care of someone else. You have to look at your own boundaries. And I'm also going to invite my other guest because I know she's already unmuted herself to answer, because basically this is her expertise. And what a great segue to come in, because this is something that she's going to answer. So, Heidi Dunstan, she is a certified grief educator, an international best-selling author and speaker, and Heidi is committed to changing the narrative on grief so the legacies of those we lost are not forgotten. And she actually has a thing about what not to say to grievers. So Heidi, welcome. And
Hey,
I
Maria,
know
it's great to see you.
you're just itching to answer the question, and I
I
know you're going to
am.
put them the right.
Yeah, I mean, you know me, and I teach people what to say and not say to somebody who's grieving, so we don't lose the legacies of those we've lost. We can't control what the people around us think and do, but I can say that if you're actually in a good place and you're going to the holidays, let people know like what you're doing to hold space for the person that you are missing. Let them know, I'm really excited to go and volunteer in their memory, or I'm excited for this, or I'm really able to hold this space. I'm looking forward to cooking mom's favorite meal or dad's favorite dessert or whatever. And people know that you're finding ways to honor your person, and know that if they're walking on eggshells, it's because they care and they don't know what to say. So don't be like, oh my gosh, you're worried about it. Turn around and be like, thanks so much for loving on me. Thanks so much for caring to worry about, making sure I'm okay. Accept the grace. And if they're walking on eggshells, it's their way of handling that. And when they see that you're okay, then they're going to be like, oh, I'm okay. Right. And if you're not okay, it's okay to say you're not okay. It's okay to say, I miss my person. You know, Funeral directors are extremely busy the month of December, especially the last 2 weeks of December. A lot of people die during the holidays. And so not only are we dealing with recent losses, my husband died 2 days after Christmas and the day before my 40th birthday. It's common. But on top of that, we also have the anniversaries. So it's not just like the loss that we had right now, it's all the anniversaries that come up. And it's when we really feel those voids and those times where they're supposed to be there. Dad was supposed to carve the turkey, or I was supposed to write his name on the gift tags. All of those places, signing Christmas cards, taking Christmas photos, putting up decorations. We all have decorations for our people, right? When they're here and when they're gone. And so we really feel those voids. And so if you are a griever and that void feels really big, let somebody know. Say, I know that it's supposed to be festive and bright right now, but I feel kind of bah humbug because I miss my person. And you're allowed to. Because if they meant something to you, all you're doing is showing them that you're trying to find a new way to love them. That's it. Grief is finding a new way to love somebody. And so ask for the help. And if you want, we can dive into the conversation of what the people can say and not say so that they can invite their grief to the holiday table.
And Heidi, I know that is what you've made your expertise or your lane, because a lot of times as a griever, people well-intentioned, and I love how Renee had said it's the impact. Sometimes it's not the intent, it's the impact of how it lands. People will say things, and I know most grievers dislike any sentence that starts, at least.
Yeah, definitely. Anything that starts with at least means that you're minimizing the person right before you. At least they're not suffering, but the person right in front of you is. So it doesn't serve. At least you can get another dog. Sounds kind of okay, but change it. At least you can have another child. Not okay. Right? And so any of those sentences just hurt. At least, really struggle is really messy, and it can get messy fast. And so I just avoid them at all cost. I just had a friend, her mom just passed of dementia. And her mom, it's been a long road, but it's not my place to say at least she's not suffering anymore. It was when she said, I'm relieved that she's not she's not suffering anymore. Then it's her process, not mine. Then we can have that conversation, but it's not for me to dictate. At least you have faith in God. Well, when you lose somebody that you cherish or you've gone through a traumatic event, some people question their faith. So I don't even talk faith until somebody's gone there with me. Right? It's an invitation, and I wait for the invitation. Right? And we talk, like, death comes up a lot in everyday conversations, especially in these circles. We talk about death all the time. But I can tell you that we ask inappropriate questions. And I think part of it is because of movies and TV. I can tell you, I've had Uber drivers who, Maria, I travel a lot. You and I were just in England together a couple of weeks ago. I get Uber drivers. They're like, are you married? And I'm like, no, I'm widowed. And they're like, they look in the rear view because I don't look like I should be a widow. And then they're like, well, how did he die? That is one of the very first questions I often get. And I want you to think, when you ask cause of death, I know that you're going there because you saw it on CSI and, Law and Order and all those shows, but you're taking somebody back to one of the worst days of their lives. Right? And if you don't know the person, do you really need to know how they died? You don't, unless you got a magic wand, unless you're at Oxford and you met Harry Potter, who has, the magic wand that can bring somebody back to life. The cause of death really doesn't matter. And I want you to think, when you ask that question and say the person died by suicide or overdose or by a crime, those can be really, really difficult for somebody to relive, especially if the person saw the body. My husband died by heart attack. I'll be honest and open with you guys. And I was with him. I performed CPR. I watched them work on him. So it's not a day that I want to go to on a regular basis. And when I do, I want it to be people who knew him intimately. And so if there is somebody that has passed and you do know them and you feel like you do need to know that answer, ask, may I ask what happened? Ask for permission if they're willing to go there with you at that time and space. Right? It isn't, a lot of people almost demand it. They almost demand the answer, and that isn't fair. And know that the answer doesn't serve. We often, especially around suicide, we often want to know how they died by suicide. Why? Why do you need to know that? Right? So check your questions. Are they for you, or will they harm the person that you're asking? Okay. And lots of times in my space, when somebody lets me know that they've had a loss in their life, I might say, was it recent? And they say yes. And I might say, was it expected? That's all I really need to know. And it's enough for me to ask for them to know that they could tell me more if they wanted, but I don't need any more information than that.
And I love how you say that, Heidi, because in some aspects, I'm like wondering, do we become that because we've had our own experiences of loss? Because we do become more illiterate. So
What do you mean? Who becomes more illiterate?
what I'm saying is that, and I love how you educate.
Yeah, thank you.
Right? It really is, and it's definitely needed. I sometimes feel that not that I ever asked anyone beforehand, because I kind of figured if I didn't know them, it was none of my business of how someone passed. My idea is if someone passed, they passed. But I'm sure I probably have said some things that were inappropriate before my son died.
Oh,
Or
for sure.
even in my pain, I'll go, right? I mean, one of the aspects is, even as a griever, how words land and how they impact us. We can also say something out of hurt and pain,
Mhm.
right? And I guess that's where I was kind of going with it, is grace is on both sides, but you're right. When someone is grieving, there are certain questions not to ask. And I think certain questions are not to be asked of anyone anytime, unless you know them and they want to share.
Yeah. And I think actually that's why so many grievers deal with the silence. I believe that a lot of people are afraid they're going to say the wrong thing, and so they say nothing at all.
Mm.
And that silence, for those of us that have been through grief, we all know that silence is deafening. It's big, and it can really destroy relationships, because all of a sudden, as a griever, you're now grieving the loss of those relationships as well. And you're like, why can't you show up for me? And that can be really difficult. And I mean, I know lots of people that have said to me, Heidi, I had really good friends see me and cross the road and walk on the other side of the street because they didn't know what to say to me. And I can tell you that when you don't have the words, it's okay to say, you're important to me, and I'm not good in these situations, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I want to be here for you. How can I support you? That is a way bigger statement than nothing or call me if you need me.
And that's a huge statement. That should be a standard, right? I mean, not that there's ever standard statements, but that actually shows that you care for someone,
Yeah.
that you don't know. I mean, isn't it refreshing if for someone to be honest and say, I don't know what to say, but I want to be here for you.
Yeah. And it's okay to say, how can I support you today?
Hmm.
Rather than the call me if you need me. It can be really hard. Um, and when you said earlier that grace needs to be given on both sides, I totally agree. I know so many grievers that are like, oh, they never call. Nobody calls. Well, your person died. You didn't lose your 10 fingers. Your 10 fingers still work. You can dial phone numbers just as well as you could before. And people get a little pissy with me about that one, but I'm really quite firm about it. Like, we also have to be able to say, these are people like that don't know how to deal with us, and they're not sure what they're going to get when they dial, so they don't call. And I'm not saying it's right, but if we want them in our lives, we have to extend that grace. And sometimes it means we've got to pick up the phone.
Mm. Yeah. And I think I'm thinking back on mine, I'm sure, yeah. Um, and sometimes, especially as a griever, we sometimes are in that brain fog.
Oh, yeah.
And it may be years later, and sometimes we may not even know, do we want the relationship or the friendship to continue? And I think that's where the 10 fingers happen. If it's someone that was really close and you really like their company, call them up.
Yep.
If it's someone that you're kind of like on the fence, then maybe let your fingers rest.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I can tell you that if you continue to say nobody calls me, that's a you problem, not a them problem. And I remember I was doing widows counseling and they showed us a video. And this woman probably in this video said it about 7 times in the video. And I was at that stage. I was probably about 9 months post loss of Mike. And it was like, it hit my head hard that I was like, I can dial their number just as much. And some of them I chose not to call back. Okay. Some of them I was like, no, there's too much water under the bridge. Some of them I also realized I was a reminder to them that Mike was gone because they were close to him. And then that was their grieving process, was they seeing me was too hard. And then some of them I reached out to, and others just showed up. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people show up that you don't really think would show up. I call them the angels in grief, right? The ones that are like, they just show up and you're like, I mean, I had somebody take down my Christmas tree. I had them like do all the baking for the service. And like, it was beautiful how some people just showed up, and people that I didn't really know that. I mean, I knew them, but not that. I didn't think that well, right? Um, and so when you to be that angel for somebody, whether it be that you just take them out for tea or you say, hey, I know Christmas is hard right now. You're welcome to come to dinner. Or if you'd like, I'd love to meet you the next day and bring some leftovers over, right? We can show up in places and spaces in a really cool way during the holidays. We don't have to be all in our own little lanes. We can say, hey, we'd love to have so and so over, and we'd like to honor your person. Could we have their photo and put a candle beside it and honor them during the meal or during whatever they were doing? Um, or we're going to go to this activity. Like, I mean, lots of cities do like Christmas light displays. Can we do that in honor of your child or your whoever? There's lots of things that we can do. If it's somebody who's really close to you, you can create like memory stockings where it could be like photos or a memory book, or like, dad's aftershave smell or whatever, could become a new tradition. Oh, dad always bought scratch off lottery tickets, so everybody's getting a lottery ticket this year for Christmas. Or you go and volunteer in honor of the person at one of their favorite charities. or donate money in honor. There's lots of things that we can do during the holidays to hold space and honor the people that we love, that allows somebody to go, this was important and thank you. And yes, it may come with tears, and that's okay. Tears are just their heart talking. But it's okay to let them feel everything, and thank them for their courage, and thank them for being real with you, right? Thank them for just showing up, because sometimes in grief, showing up is hard. And so when somebody cries for me, give me one sec. I always say, thank you for being open with me. Thank you for sharing that. I see it as a privilege, not a burden. When somebody wants to share their memories of somebody that they love, I'm honored. And it doesn't even matter if I knew them. How can I help, Diana? Oh, you're muted.
Hi. What I wanted to mention is my mom passed away not unexpectedly in September, and as we didn't have the memorial service um, until late October, um, and there had been some family division in surrounding my mom and circumstance. Anyway, so there was not a lot of family present at the memorial, and because she was 93, there weren't a lot of peers available to fill the seats there. And my best friend, um, who is Jewish, I'd attended many why did it go out of my mind? Not Seder, Shiva, where people come and visit and they bring. And I thought, wow, I wish Episcopalians, which is what I am, had that kind of a support, kind of an ongoing thing, not just like, okay, and we will have a light refreshments will be served. What really would have been wonderful is in the absence of some family, I could have had a little more time, more individualized, to connect with individuals that knew mom and showed up, and I really kind of wished that. And I just kind of wanted it provided me an opportunity to reflect upon different cultures and different ideas. And I think becoming more familiar with them is a possibility to be able to draw upon those and say, you know what, that's the type of um, that's the type of opportunity I'd like to create for for what I need or what the family might need. And I just wanted to mention, I think everything you're saying is fascinating. I'm really enjoying what you have to say, but um, yeah, it was interesting. How would one like kind of go about asking for that, or creating that type of it's a cultural tradition. It's not like, hey, you know what I'd love it if you guys would come by with whatever.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
in the Jewish faith, I mean, I'm only learning this recently, is like when you lose somebody significant, they actually have a prayer that they do multiple times a day for a year. Like they honor their lost for a long period of time. And many other faiths and in kind of North American culture, it's like, so and so died. Have you done the paperwork? And let's get back to work. Right? It is kind of just a moving through the process. And you're left to kind of navigate it on your own, which is why a lot of people have no idea what to say and not say to people, because they don't know. And then on top of that, the griever's going, am I doing it right? Like, because there's a manual on grieving, which there isn't, right? So it can be tricky. A couple tools that I find helpful, mealtrain.com. A friend of mine gifted this to me because Mike died at the holidays. They were going away, and she was like, I want to bring you food, but we're actually heading to the airport. So we set up Meal Train, And Meal Train's a website where people can sign up and they create a profile for you. And you can set up, like, people can say, hey, on Wednesday, I'm bringing you all the fixings for tacos. And somebody else can sign up for Friday and they're bringing you lasagna. And I can tell you that it was a great relief. One, that I didn't end up with 17 lasagnas because everybody makes lasagna for some reason. And I'm only one girl. And so that was cool. And then it also has I think Meal Train's free, or it was. And then they have one where if you, like, say there was an accident and somebody needs visitation or you need help with chores, for $10, you can get support there. So that's a really great way. What I loved about it is it gave me a link and I could put it in my different spaces and places. So I could send it to my church, or I could send it to my business group, or I could send it to my friends, and it was really easy. And it let me know I could put in dietary restriction. It was awesome. So that's a great way. Gifts is something we always want to lean on gifts when it comes to grieving, but they're funny. Let's bring a bunch of flowers so it feels like a funeral home. That's not for me. It can be for others. One of the best grieving gifts I ever got was from my best friend across the street. He showed up with the Costco-sized case of Kleenex, really good Kleenex. That was useful. He knows I'm a sprinkler. And so I showed, like, having people show up in places and spaces that way was helpful. Gift cards rather than actual food, like Uber Eats or DoorDash, or what's the other one? Skip the Dishes, or even just grocery or gas cards. The reality is when we lose somebody, it changes our finances, whether we like it or not. Some people, it might change their finances down the road with insurance and policies and things like that. But in the immediate times, sometimes those, like, $25 or $50 gift cards can be super helpful. The other thing, my half sister did this for me, is she sent me a grief gift, but she'd gone on my social media and she found pictures of my husband and I, and she printed them and she put them on chapters that she thought would be appropriate for me, and then mailed it to me. And so that was kind of a nice thing to be able to see photos and do what was right for me. And so know that we can show up for people, just by being us, just how we normally would, just thinking outside the box a little bit, literally like a Kleenex box.
I love those tips that you gave, Heidi, because it really is. People don't know how to be around a griever. But what I do want to ask is, especially because of the holidays, what's something that you've stopped doing because of loss? Because a lot of times loss changes things. And may I ask?
What have I stopped doing? Um,
That maybe you've done beforehand and all of a sudden it no longer fits in.
so I personally, this is my first Christmas that I'm going to be home with my family since Mike died, and that's been almost 7 years.
Mm.
I haven't been able to be in this house celebrating Christmas since he passed. It's too hard. With people around me, I would say grace. Like, there's a heck of a lot more grace. I think outside the box a little bit more for the people that are going through grief. I reach out a little bit more. So, and it doesn't need to be a long conversation. It could just be, hey, I'm thinking about you today. It could be, hey, I know this is your first Christmas without your mom. I want you to know I'm sending you a hug, and let me know if you want to chat. Right? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And so it's about showing up and loving people where they're at without judgment.
Mm.
Right? I think that's kind of the biggest piece that I think stops connection in grief, is the fact that we judge how somebody's grieving. We judge, we think, oh, I would do it this way. Oh, they cry too much, or they don't cry at all, or oh, they took their wedding ring off, or oh, look, they still have the kids' room all set up. It doesn't matter how they do it. It's, as individuals, our fingerprint. And if we can love them where they're at rather than where we think they should be, we're going to be able to grieve with grace together rather than separate in isolation.
Well, thank you so much, Heidi. And I know that this year will, of course, be different. As you said, you've always been away,
I have,
um,
yeah. I always go to the beach. So one,
right?
it'll be a lot colder because I'm in Canada.
Yes, and especially where you are, it's even colder than. Um, but definitely, it really is. And one of the showcases, I think, in regards to grief, is about there's no one way, like there's no one size fits all, and we all have to do what's right for us.
Yeah.
And that I think you've shown today, and I really love. Well, I always have. I've always loved your honesty, and your directness. Uh, right? And so I really do. I'm so glad that I met you and you're in my life.
I love it too. And you know me, you know that um so many people, they know they want to do different when somebody they love is grieving. They just don't know how. And if we can start having these regular conversations, yeah, exactly. Um, then it makes it a lot easier. And honestly, when you do stick your foot in your mouth, just apologize or ask if you can put a salt and pepper shaker in there and be like, I'm not so good at this, but I'm doing my best. And I love you and you're important to me. And I'm sorry that that didn't land right. So I am doing a complimentary how to invite somebody in their grief to the holiday table on the 1st. May I put the link in the chat or
Definitely. Yes.
let me grab it? I meant to copy and paste it and then I got distracted. You know my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's free for anybody to attend. Grievers find it helpful. Um, and so do people outside of grief. So if you know somebody who's going to be going through loss, or you're just like, I don't know what to say to them, this is a great little 45-minute presentation and conversation about how to honor those places and spaces during the holidays because they are sticky.
And so true. I mean, most of the time, the whole year sometimes is sticky. The holiday season seems to be more intensified because of the expectations that everyone is supposed to be happy and celebrating.
I think it's also because the voids are seen.
Mm,
That's when we have from like places where people are supposed to be in our lives and they're not there. And so it isn't just in the immediate loss, it's because we're like, so and so's not here, or what about mom's favorite? And what about, we feel those voids even more because of the traditions. And so, and they're real emotions. It doesn't matter if you've lost somebody a year ago or 15 years ago. They're significant and they can be felt and they come up at any time, right? People forget that, the day that, I mean, my husband was 24 years older than me, but the day that I turn the same age as him will be a hard day,
mm.
right? Because I never should have been older than him. And so, we don't get to decide what our grief looks like. We do get to navigate through it and hopefully with some good people alongside with us.
And so true. And this is why I always go. Grief is carrying love and loss in the same breath. And a lot of people kind of figure it's too separate, and it's not. We breathe it, we feel it, and both emotions can. The love exists, and so does the loss, and so true. And definitely, I'm going to make sure that your link is there because it is
Yeah.
important. How do you
Yeah.
invite people to a holiday gathering? How do you go to a holiday gathering, right? And I know this is your lane, and I'm so glad that you were here. Thank you, Heidi, for saying yes.
Thank you.
And I'm so
Yes.
glad that we finally met in person.
I know. In England,
In
well, we
England,
met in
of
Vancouver
course.
before, but yes. Thank you. Thank you. Take
Thank you
care.
so much, Heidi.
Bye.
Oh, and that is definitely so interesting because a lot of times we don't know what to say to a griever, and we do, as Heidi says, we put our foot in our mouth. And I think, as she said, it's okay to, if you put your foot in your mouth, to say that you did. It's when we don't that I think it becomes the impact, as Renee had mentioned. So, my next guest, which again, yes, I know all these people. We haven't met personally, but I've known her virtually for, I think, a number of years. And Michaela Jones, ND, I remembered the ND, naturopath. She'll explain it because she's a sought out mind and body connection specialist. She's integrative wellness specialist and a holistic health expert. And she's passionate about empowering individuals to reclaim their well-being. So one of the reasons on this, and Michaela, I'm going to say thank you for saying yes and showing up, is because at any time that we're in grief, as a griever, we forget about ourselves. We forget to take care of ourselves. I don't even know what the words to say, is that we become on autopilot, but autopilot basically just means we're functioning, we're not being fully present, and we definitely do not take care of ourselves. And especially, I believe, during the holiday season, we're going to forget about ourselves even more so, because we do have sometimes some emotions that arise that maybe were unexpected. And so, Michaela, I want to thank you so much for saying. And also, I guess, as a holistic health expert, what is one way to show ourselves compassion and self-care?
Well, that is well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Um, that's actually kind of a loaded question because so many of us don't take care of ourselves, as you said, particularly during the holidays when emotions start to run high and things kind of catch us off guard. Honestly, I would say the biggest thing that you can do to take care of yourself and show yourself compassion is to set boundaries. I know that sounds weird when we're talking about grief, but it's a very big part of taking care of ourselves because only we know how we feel and only we can determine what we're willing to accept or put up with. And we know where our line is. So if we establish our own boundaries, of what we're willing to do, what we're willing to put up with, and then holding those boundaries, that's actually one of the most compassionate things that we can do for ourselves. If we know that talking about certain things will bring up, you know, intense emotions for us, and we choose that we don't want to talk about that. If someone approaches us and wants to talk about that, it's okay to say, no, I don't want to talk about that. You don't owe anyone anything more than you owe yourself.
And that is so true, and something that we forget, because a lot of times when we think about it, we feel that we need to over explain something.
Yes.
I've said, and this is from my mentor, David Kessler, who has actually said, when we say no, that is a complete sentence. Like, no
Absolutely.
is a complete sentence. We do not need to explain ourselves. If we are declining an invitation or any event, we can say no without having to over explain.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I use that same expression. I use it a lot with a lot of my clients. No is a complete sentence. You don't require anyone to give anyone an explanation about why you say no. You're not required to give them. I know some people teach, well, you should give them an alternative solution of, well, I won't do that, but I'm willing to do this. You don't even have to do that. Because no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anybody any explanation, any alternative arrangements, or anything like that. No means no.
And especially around the holidays, where I mean, this is what we've been talking about all morning, in the sense of setting boundaries for our own selves and for other people. Because a lot of times there are times when emotions arise which can be overwhelming.
Yes.
And at times you may feel that you want to be alone. Or even sometimes maybe you feel like being surrounded by people. And at times I always go, especially in grief or even in loss of any type, we can be surrounded by people and all of a sudden an emotion
Yes.
can come up and all of a sudden we want to have alone time. Is it a good idea to say go to the bathroom and have alone time? Or to
Absolutely.
just say, maybe this is the time that I need to say goodbye and head home.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Actually, that is, one of the things that I tell people is, yeah, if you're finding yourself being triggered or emotions are just like coming up because sometimes they will hit us, and you'll be doing fine one moment, and then the next moment everything changes. It is okay to excuse yourself for a moment and pull yourself together and then come back. Or if you just have had enough for the day, just say, okay, I'm done. It's all right to just excuse yourself and leave because you need to take care of you. You know what you need, and it's no one else's job to tell you what you need or what you should be doing. I call it the shoulds and the oughts. It's like no one can tell you what you should be doing and you ought to be doing this and that and the other. It is up to you. Again, boundaries. You know where your line is. It is okay to say, okay, you know what? I've had enough. And you can choose in that moment whether it's I'm just going to step away for a moment, regroup and come back, or if, I think I'm just going to leave now in this here while it's still somewhat on a good note because I need to take care of me.
And
And
that
that's
is,
okay.
and I think that's the aspect where people sometimes want to be validated, right? In the sense of when we're hurting, we may not trust. I call them heart whispers.
Mhm.
But we may not trust our intuition. We may not trust our own choices or judgment.
Oh no, I was saying, yeah, that's very true. Again, it's because when we have these intense emotions, our mind and our body starts to disconnect.
Mm.
And our intuition actually comes from our physical body. I know that sounds weird, but our body gives us cues to what's going on emotionally and mentally. And that's one of the reasons why I teach body awareness because when we're connected, our body tells us what's going on. But during times of grief or intense emotions, our mind and our bodies disconnect. So we are not getting those cues that we would normally get.
Mm.
Like the little hair standing on the back of your neck when something's not quite right. We disconnect from those. And so it makes it hard to trust our intuition because those cues are either distorted or they're not there. Yeah.
Mhm. And I love how you said, like, I didn't realize that the sort of the disconnect. I mean, I knew when I was in grief that some of the aspects like it felt like a disconnect. Like your brain's on one
Mhm.
aspect, um, and your body's on another
Yes.
sort of plane, right? Like they don't mesh.
Yes.
Um, I love how you said that because in some ways, when we're in grief, like when we feel that something's wrong with us because there's
Yes.
that disconnect.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you said that it happens naturally.
Yeah. And, I work a lot with people that have experienced trauma in their lives. Okay. And grief is just another type of trauma.
Mhm.
And during times of trauma, we do tend to disconnect because it is a survival mechanism.
Mm.
It really is. And so that's why that kind of comes about, because many times during times of trauma or grief, again, grief is just another type of trauma, we still have to go on with life some kind of way. So the best way to do that, when our heart is hurting, when our minds are racing, when we just have like these overwhelming thoughts, as a way of surviving, we disconnect from that so our physical bodies can keep moving.
So, what's a good tip to say to ground? Because I think a lot of times, especially, I mean, for a lot of things, but for um, especially during the holidays when everything is intensified, right? We kind of have this aspect of feeling that either we have to have everything together.
Mhm.
And so a lot of us, myself included earlier on, would put a mask on. And what I mean
Yes.
by a mask is not a physical mask that you put on, but we mask our feelings. We pretend everything is fine. And yet, underneath, we are hurting. And so, what is some way to sort of ground us that we don't have to pretend as much, maybe?
Huh. Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked that. Actually, I found, as I also do somatic work, which is all about integrating, mind and body and releasing stored emotions and all that kind of stuff. I have found that breath work actually works really good for dealing with grief scenarios. And there are actually different types of breathing mechanisms that you can utilize depending on where you are, whether you can like step away, or because obviously, if you can't really step away, you don't want to really be doing something that's going to make people like look at you like, okay, what the heck is she doing? Kind of thing. So I would like to offer these for those who are wondering about that. There are actually probably about 4 or 5 different ones that I recommend, depending on where you are and what you feel comfortable with. One is like a simple, like what we call an extended exhale, and that's basically when you breathe in and then you breathe out, and you try to breathe out for as many counts as you possibly can. So it's like inhale and then exhale, and then just push it out for as long as you can, because this helps quickly calm stress and anxiety. So if you're feeling really stressed at the moment, or you're anxious, it's like, oh my gosh, you're going to be around a bunch of people and you're really not sure, how that's going to go, and you're just like really super anxious. That one is really good for that. Then there's one that is called the heart-centered breath. And basically, you just kind of put your hand over your heart, and then you just breathe slowly and into the chest space, and allowing the breath to fill the chest space. And, so you inhale and you exhale. And this helps kind of reconnect you to your heart, to what you're feeling. Because since we are disconnecting, sometimes we feel like we're not allowed to feel those feelings, or sometimes the feelings are just so overwhelming that we don't want to feel them. But in order to truly be able to move forward and keep going, we do have to feel them on some level. So doing that allows you to feel those emotions without overwhelming yourself. So that's one of the reasons I like that one. Then there is the sigh breath, which I absolutely love this one. I give this one to my clients all the time, and this one's really good for like releasing just like the negative energy, or you're not really releasing all of the grief, but it's like all that pent up, just I just gotta let it go. And you just basically just inhale through your nose, and then you do a long open mouth big sigh exhale, and it's like blowing out all of that pent up stuff. So that is actually one of my favorites. Literally, you just go, and then It's like if you're like blowing on a mirror after taking a shower and you're like, and you're writing in it. You're just
Mm.
kind of using that to just exhale all of that pent up excess energy, emotion, or whatever it is that you just need to release in that moment because the body knows, even if you don't know what's going on and what needs to be released, the body knows what needs to be released. All you got to do is just give it that mechanism. So I find that one to be really good when you just you don't know what's going on. You know you need to release something, so you just release it.
And do you make
Then
a
of course
sound with that too? Because I was thinking of there's a practice where you breathe in, and then
Mhm.
when you breathe out, you make a loud sound, like a big exhale sound, like you blow it
Yeah,
out.
that's yeah. Big sigh sound. Yeah, whatever that means for you. So when I'm using that with clients, sometimes, I just have them, to just do it like they're breathing on the mirror, the sometimes I tell them to just let it all out as audibly as possible. And then whatever that feels like for them, because some people it's like they're letting out a scream, others is just like so whatever it is for them, again, the body knows. But yeah, audible sounds, absolutely. Yeah. So
And I love how you say that the body knows, because it really is. The body remembers.
yes,
And
yes,
the body holds so much more than
yes.
what we actually um, believe that it does.
It does. It does. There's actually a really good book, and it's called "The Body Keeps the Score,"
Mm.
and it talks a lot about that because even if we don't remember everything mentally, our body remembers absolutely everything. And grief and trauma and those types of and heavy emotions, they all get stored in the body. That's one of the reasons why I specialize the way that I do, because I feel like that's a piece that everybody misses, is that there is so much connectivity between mind, emotions, and body. And many times when you have things that are going on in the physical body, there's an emotional anchor. And grief is one of those things that does get stored in the body, and it affects the physical body. You think that it just affects your emotions and it affects your mental state, but it also affects your physical state as well. In particular, one of the reasons why breath work works really great for dealing with grief is because grief is one of the types of emotions that gets stuck in the lungs.
Mm.
It often affects our lungs, which is going to affect our ability to breathe. You may hear people having shallow breath, that kind of thing. So the lungs are often affected by grief. So being able to practice breath work will help you to not only help you release some of the trauma of the grief, but also be able to help your physical body continue to be able to operate at a good capacity, especially since we're probably also not taking care of ourselves very well as well, on top of all that. So,
And that's so true. I mean, the other guest, Heidi, had did say, because there are, and I don't, and I dislike using the word stages because there is no stages in grief.
right,
It's a journey. So when it's the rawness, it's either sometimes I always go, we either forget to eat or we overeat. And it
yes,
depends on if you're an emotional eater. So there's no judgment here. It's just sometimes how our emotions work. And even when the journey continues, whether it's year 5 or year 10, our bodies are holding on to some wounds that we have never been able to express.
right,
And we had Renee talk about the the trauma, right? Because there's trauma even in grief.
yes,
And so a lot of times we make light of everything in some ways. And I think it's because most people are uncomfortable on having the heavy conversations, and this is why we're having these conversations, is to really bring an awareness and to sort of say, these are topics to talk about. Because the
Yes.
more we talk about them, the more we get to release them from our body. And the work that you're doing is so important. Like, I didn't realize that it stayed in the lungs.
Mhm. Yeah.
A- and my son died like 16 years ago. And so it's probably one of the reasons why I have sometimes breathing issues. But I had breathing issues from before because I have asthma. But it's also one of those things that at times we don't know what our body is carrying because we're so focused on our emotions.
Yeah. Right.
And we don't even make that connection that it is altogether. It is the mind body connection,
Yes.
and it includes emotions.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When you were talking, I was thinking of a story of someone who had immeasurable loss. And I'd also like to point out too, I know that we're talking about losing loved ones mostly here around the holidays because that seems to be, but there are other types of losses too.
Oh,
And
definitely.
and people are probably experiencing more than one because
Mhm.
you're experiencing the loss of a loved one, but you're also experiencing loss of, what you thought your life was going to look like, or, or any other things that compounds that loss. And I was thinking about someone who had experienced immeasurable loss. And then every time she was triggered, she felt like she was losing her breath.
Mm.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Every time she thought of what had happened, I can't breathe. And that's one of the ways that what's going on in the emotions and in the mental state totally affects our bodies and can create physical symptoms in the body that you may not realize. Again, we're disconnecting as well. So you may not connect that, oh my gosh, I'm having, bronchitis issues, that it's related to trauma and grief that you're still carrying with you. And as you said, there's there's no timeline on it. Could have been carrying it the entire time. Sometimes it may trigger more than others. And we often will just put it aside because we don't make that connection. You don't connect that, oh, I'm having these other issues. You don't connect that it's also related to the grief that you're experiencing as well. And so I think it's important, like you said, that we have these conversations because those are the things that people don't think about.
And I love how, and I didn't even think about it when I even asked you as as a guest. It was more about your expertise because you are a holistic health expert and the integrative wellness. And now I'm realizing when you're talking about breath, because I'm using my line as caring, love, and loss in the same breath.
Yes.
And how sort of is it synchronicity or whatever the word is, in the sense of you're talking about it's our breath, and it really is.
Yeah.
We carry everything in this one breath. It's love, it's loss, and you're so true of what you said about loss is a big umbrella. And for the holiday season, yes, we could be missing a person who is physically no longer here because of death. However, we can still miss a person who's physically not here because of estrangement. I was going to say
Yes.
something else and it meant something else because I mispronounce words sometimes. Where families, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, are not speaking to each other.
Yes.
And there's
Yes.
no judgment on that because none of us are going to know the reason for it.
Right.
And so sometimes I feel that we need to give people the grace I mean, I use the pillars of care in the sense of saying we need to give compassion to ourselves,
Mhm.
right? Acknowledging our thoughts and feelings, releasing the guilt, the regrets, and the shame, and evolving to who we're becoming.
Yes.
And when you say the breath work, that really encompasses all together, because in breath work, we are giving ourselves that compassion,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? In breath
Yeah.
work, we're acknowledging our feelings and our thoughts.
Yes.
We're also releasing in that breath work by breathing in and exhaling,
Yes.
and also of evolving of who we are. Like in that moment, we become one with our breath.
Yeah.
Ooh, you and I should work more together.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also like to add too that some other benefits of the breath work too in the constructs of what we're talking about today is that it also like helps regulate our nervous system, which we get so stressed out around the holidays and when we're experiencing grief and when we're missing our people or whatever. We get so stressed out. The breath work helps regulate our nervous system. It also helps us to move the stuck emotional energy. Again, there's no timeline. It just changes from day to day. And, one day it's small emotion, next day it might be big emotion. So the breath works allows us to move those emotions through without them staying stuck in the body and then showing up later. Okay, so the breath work allows us to deal with that in that moment to allow it to move through without staying put. It also creates space for emotional release. Okay, we grief is an emotion itself, but it's also a state of mind that brings in even other emotions. So it also creates the space that allows us to feel those emotions without overwhelming us. Okay. I think sometimes we get overwhelmed when we start thinking about things. So it allows that. It also helps us to build resilience, um, which allows us to respond to people rather than react during holiday triggers. Okay. It allows us just a little more grace when people are getting on our nerves in the holidays. So we don't immediately react or lash out or whatever. And it also gives you what's the best way to say this? It gives you a little bit of control over something when it feels like everything else is uncontrollable.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And you mentioned a word, patience, I think, because or no, people get, I changed it to presence. You said when people get on our nerves. Um, it
It
is.
might be an American saying.
No, because in the holiday times, there's a lot of added stress. And when we have the stress with grief and loss, it intensifies where sometimes we're, I don't want to say prickly, I guess we could say prickly, right? We're sensitive and sometimes maybe could be oversensitive, maybe it's not. It's just a lot of times it's the impact that we get either from words. And I love how you say that for grounding, no matter where we're going, whether it's going into the mall, because the malls, of course, have all this decorations, the music, it can actually be overstimulant sometimes.
Yeah.
Even sometimes going to an event could be overstimulation. And we do want that grounding aspect.
Yeah.
And you're right, that breath. I mean, you gave 3 ways of breathing, and I love that, right? And I think what I'd love to end on, if you're okay with that, is having to demonstrate one breathing practice. So that way we
Okay.
can give our audience something so that way they have with them to say, you know what, I can use this right now when I'm feeling overstimulant, being overwhelmed, being just like too much of
Yeah.
it, to ground into my own self of where I feel safe. Because that's really what we want to do, is we want to have where the safety feels within our own self.
Yeah. Okay. I'd love to share that. All right. So I know you asked for one, but do you mind if I give you two?
Nope.
Because because I have two that
That okay, Zach?
I think would be very, very beneficial for everyone. So the first you probably heard of, it's called box breathing. It's
Mm-hmm.
really good for grounding. You can use it not only when you're feeling triggered, I use it sometimes when I have a hard time going to sleep. So box breathing is really good for grounding. And it's just what it sounds like. It's like you think of a box, okay? So it's like counts of four. So you inhale for the count of four, hold for the count of four, exhale for the count of four, and then do nothing for the count of four. So the rest. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, rest, 2, 3, 4. And then you can start over. You can do that as many times that you need. It's called a box because it's 4, 4, 4. So if you think of a square, 4, 4, 4. Inhale to count of 4, hold it count of 4, exhale count of 4, and then rest count of 4. And you just do that until you feel like, okay, I'm grounded now. I can go on. That's one of my favorites. I use it a lot for a lot of things. If I'm getting triggered or if I'm getting stressed or I'm having anxiety, it's really good because you can just sit there and you can just do it. No one even really needs to know you're doing it, so it's really good for that. And then the other one is actually called the grief breath, and this is from somatic therapy. And this one is also a really good one too, and it's really, really easy. So that's why I wanted to share this one as well. And basically, you inhale while lifting your shoulders up because sometimes when we're under trauma and grief and stress, we feel like the weight of the world is on us or we're carrying all this stuff with us. So you inhale and lift your shoulders. Then as you exhale, you drop your shoulders. And so it's like almost like releasing all of that you're carrying around with you. So inhale, exhale. And you can add the audible exhale to that if you want to kind of get like a little extra in there. But it's all about lifting the shoulders and then dropping the shoulders. And that's signaling the body to just let go of what you're carrying on your shoulders at that moment. And those two together are really good, especially for this time of year. And you can use them almost anywhere. So
So, Michaela, thank you so much. I did. It's a delight having you on and sharing your expertise. And I do want to give, because I know you wrote a book.
I have multiples.
You have multiples. Yes, yes. But your most recent book.
So my most recent book is what is my most recent book? Oh my gosh.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot. You can share a name and
Well, you know what? It's not my most recent one, but this is the one I've been doing some stuff with lately. And so I'll talk about this one. It's called Rewriting Your Story.
hmm.
So it's all about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we've written about ourselves, about our health, about us. And it's about changing the story. And actually, I think this works really good with what we're talking about today because our story has already been rewritten with the grief that we're experiencing. But we don't have to stay with that story. We can rewrite even that story to something that is better for us, that allows us to move forward and being able to remember those that we have lost. And as you said, and holding that love in our hearts without being overwhelmed by it and without being overly grieved about it. And um, and recognizing that it is okay for us to move forward. I think so many people feel guilt when they lose someone because they feel like if they go on, that they're dishonoring that person. And so being able to rewrite the guilt story, I think, is something that could be very, very positive for everyone. But that being said, I do have multiple books, and they can find them at livingnaturallyforlife.com/books.
Thank you so much. It has definitely been a pleasure having you on, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay.
Mm,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I had actually had created a special guided breath practice for this event if it came up. And basically I ended it with, I can meet this moment one breath at a time.
mm,
And if you want, I can go ahead and record that and have a link available for that for like if your guests would like to go and grab that, I'd be, more than willing to have it as a recordable that they can download. So yeah.
that's
So
perfect. Thank you.
all righty. I think you got cut out. You cut out. Are you still there? Okay. For a moment, I thought I saw your mouth moving, but there was no words coming out. So it's like, okay, what happened? Did we freeze? But thank you for having me. I was happy to be here to give you some more insight on things. Hopefully, this is another set of tools that people can use to get through this holiday season, as best they can. So,
Definitely. And this is one of the reasons for having these summits is so that way the people that I know or people that I meet can share their experiences, their expertise, and their insights. Because a lot of times we only know what we know. And even through my journey, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to meet people like Michaela, like Heidi, like Adriana, and Renee, who bring their expertise. Because grief is not a one size fits all. And part of grief is having no judgment on ourselves of how we relate to it and how we demonstrate grief. Because again, emotions are personal, our thoughts are personal. Even though we always say loss is universal, your relationship is personal. The nuance is personal in the sense of because of relationships and how they died and who died. And so this is one of the reasons to bring this forward, so that way you know that you are not alone, that there is support out there, and finding the right support for you. As we say, loss is universal and personal, and so is support. Support might be universal, yet it's going to be framed for what is right for you. And I know that each person has offered something. The next 2 days, I will be having more guests for Wednesday and for Thursday. And I also want to offer that if you want something a bit more quieter, a more held space to go deeper, I will be hosting something in December, and I will share the details later on. Just so that way, anyone here, this is more open, but I also know that people want to be held in a quieter space. And I thank everyone for listening, for being here, and I thank all my guests for sharing their expertise, for sharing their heart, and for sharing something that hopefully has supported you in your journey. And I thank you.